Welcome everyone. Before I start today, I just wanted to mention something that resonated with me earlier today. Anna mentioned in her keynote speech that change is what pushes someone out of their comfort zone. So I guess that's why I'm here. My name is Asim Mehta. We are here to talk about ECA, Event Condition Action, a tool that's changing how we build automation in Drupal. Yes, Windows 98. Don't worry, this presentation is significantly more stable than the operating system. No blue screens of death. Here's what you'll walk away with. The ability to build powerful automation workflows without writing custom code. Site builders intimidated by PHP. Developers tired of repetitive hooks. This is for you. Let's dive in. Before we jump in, let's take a quick moment to thank our sponsors who make events like this possible. So who am I and why am I talking to you about ECA? I am a tech lead at Northern. I've spent the last 3+ years working with Drupal across a pretty diverse range of sectors: higher ed, government, non-profit. My focus has been on site builds and backend development, the kind of work where you're constantly writing custom hooks, building modules and thinking, there's got to be a better way to do this. That's where ECA comes in, but more on that in a moment. Recently, I've been exploring two things that really excite me: AI integration and ECA workflows. Here's why ECA matters to me and why I think it will matter to you. ECA bridges the gap between what site builders want to accomplish and what traditionally require a developer writing custom code. That's powerful. It democratizes automation. Site builders can implement business logic. Developers can move faster. Everyone wins. So let's talk about why we need this in the first place. Let's talk about the reality of Drupal development. Welcome emails when users register, notifications to managers when content needs a review, auto-publishing after approval, redirecting users based on their roles. These are common everyday requirements. Nothing exotic, but traditionally every single one of these meant writing custom code. A custom module, hook implementations, testing, deployment, maintenance. What if I told you there's a better way? Before we go further, I want to understand who's in the room. How do you currently handle automation in Drupal? Raise your hand if you're writing custom code, hooks, custom modules, that kind of thing. Okay, how about contrib modules? You're finding and configuring modules to do what you need. And finally, who's still doing things manually? Maybe you know automation would help, but you haven't implemented it yet. Perfect. Here's the thing. No matter where you are on the spectrum, ECA has something to offer you. So what is ECA? ECA stands for Event Condition Action. It's a no-code automation framework for Drupal 10 and beyond. Now, full transparency, I haven't personally used the rules module extensively, but from what I understand, ECA is considered the modern successor, rebuilt with better performance, cleaner architecture, and a visual workflow builder. Here's what matters. ECA lets you build powerful automation workflows using a visual interface. No PHP required. Let me break down how it actually works. ECA is built on 3 fundamental concepts. Let's break them down one at a time. First, the event. An event is simply the trigger, the when something happens in your automation. In the workflow builder, events are represented by this circle. You see, when you see the shape, you know it's your starting point. Every automation begins with an event. Nothing runs until something triggers it. Second, the condition. Conditions are your decision points, the if this is true part of your automation. In the workflow builder, conditions are represented by these connections. They control whether your workflow continues or stops. Event fires, condition checks. If true, we proceed. If false, nothing happens. And third, the action. Actions are the then do this, what actually happens when everything checks out. In the workflow builder, actions are these rounded rectangles. This is where the work gets done. Event triggers, condition evaluates, action executes. That's ECA. Now, let's get specific about what events actually look like in practice. These are some of the most common events you'll work with, and there are dozens more available depending on which ECA submodules you enable. Content events, when someone saves a node, creates new content. User events, registration, login. System events like cron that run on schedule. Here's how to think about it. You're tapping into the same event system that custom modules use with hooks. The difference? You're selecting from a list instead of writing a hook user insert or a hook node pre-save. When you're building your workflow, start by asking, what action in Drupal should trigger this? That's your event. Let's talk about conditions next, where you add your business logic. Conditions lets you make decisions. Should this workflow actually run for this specific situation? You can check user permissions, compare entity properties. Is this the right content type? Evaluate field values. Does this field contain what I'm looking for? Even check dates and times. Here's a practical example. Your event fires when any user registers, but your condition says only continue if they have the subscriber role. Conditions lets you be precise. They turn generic events into targeted automation. And now for the payoff, actions. Actions are where the actual work happens. This is what your automation does when the event fires and conditions pass. Send emails, manipulate entities, create, update, delete, change field values, redirect users to different pages. Here's what's important. You can chain multiple actions together, send an email and update a field and log an event all in one workflow. Actions are your toolkit. The more ECA submodules you enable, the more actions you have available. So we've covered what ECA is and how it works. Let's talk about why it matters. First and most obvious, no coding required. Site builders can implement business logic without touching PHP. But even if you are a developer, this matters. You work faster, you spend less time writing boilerplate hooks, and more time solving actual problems. Visual workflows are easier to understand and modify. When you come back to this 6 months later, or when someone else inherits your project, they can see exactly what's happening. And workflows are exportable. Build once, deploy everywhere. Let me show you what this looks like compared to the traditional approach. Here's the difference in stark terms. On the left, we have the traditional approach. Write PHP hooks, create a custom module, hours of development, testing, deployment, and you need a developer to do it. On the right, we have the ECA approach. Visual workflow, drag and drop, built in minutes. A site builder can do this. Look, I'm not saying custom code is wrong. There are absolutely times when you need it. Complex algorithms, heavy data processing, intricate API integrations. But for common automation patterns, this is a game changer. The example we are about to build in our demo would traditionally take a developer a few hours. We are going to do it in 5 minutes. All right, enough theory, let's build something. We are going to create a real working automation from scratch, a welcome email that sends automatically when a user registers. This is something every Drupal site needs, and traditionally it means writing a custom module, implementing hook user insert, dealing with the mail service. You know the drill. We are going to do it in about 5 minutes, and we are not going to write a single line of code. Let's dive in. Before we jump in, let me show you where ECA lives in Drupal. You'll find it under administration, then configuration, then workflow, and finally ECA. Once you know where it is, bookmark it. You'll be coming here often. Quick note on prerequisites for the demo that we're going to do today. ECA is modular. For today's demo, I've already installed these modules, the core ECA module, the base module, content and user submodules, the UI and the BPM and modeler. In your own setup, you'll compose or require Drupal ECA and enable the submodules you need, but we are already set up, so let's build. Okay, so first we're going to go to where ECA is, configuration, workflow, ECA. Here you can see that I already have a test model. This is where you will be adding newer models. So we're going to create a new model. First and foremost, before starting out building a model, I would like to define what the model actually does. So I would click the info icon here, and it would bring me to this form where it's asking me for basic information like label. So I'm just going to go with welcome email, You can add a version number. Since we are building it at the first time, I'll just go with 1.0. For the documentation, since we are doing, we're going to send an email. I'm just going to put something like send welcome email on user registration. There's also an option to add tags for further classification of different models and changelog when you guys are working on model updates. From there on, we can go and save it. As you can see, the model name has updated over here to welcome email. Next, let's start building out the workflow. So first, we need an event. So as we discussed, that's the circle right here. I'm going to drag that out. That opens the event browser. Since we are going to be checking for a user registration, it's basically an entity which is being inserted or created. So I'm going to search for insert content entity, and I'm going to choose that. As you see, the form config form opens up. Over here, you can choose the type of entity that we want to work with. In this case, since we are working with the user entity, I'm going to choose that. And at the bottom, you can see what all tokens are provided by this events. So these tokens can be further used ahead with the condition that we are going to attach it to. So that has saved the event. Now in order to add a condition, I'm just going to bring a dummy action for now and not assign it anything, because you can't really connect the condition unless you have an action. So if you see, choosing the arrow will bring up where do I really want to connect the condition to, and I'm just going to connect it to the action that we have here. Now in terms of the condition, we want to check for the user role. So I'm just going to search for role here. And it brings up two different options, which is role of user and role of current user. In our condition, since we want every new user registration to have an email, instead of the current user, we are going to just choose role of the user. It brings up the config form for that condition. There are two options here. First is the user account. As you can see, it mentions that either you can mention an explicit ID of the user entity or use a token which has the stored account entity. And if we check the event here, we can see that the event provides us with the entity token. So I'm just going to reuse that. And then next is the user role. The user role is where I can mention what role do I specifically want to check as part of this condition. So I'm just going to go with an authenticated user for now. You guys might have also noticed that there is a negate condition. So if we want to negate the condition and check for the inverse, we can turn this on. But for the purposes of this, I'm just going to leave it as is. And in the end, we're going to check for the action. So clicking the action also brings up the action browser. What I really want to do now is send an email when a user successfully registers. So I'm going to just search for email. And the email action should show up. I'm going to choose that. And we have three new fields now. First is the recipient email address, second is the subject, and third is the message. Now I want to make it a bit dynamic, obviously because every new user is going to have its own unique email address. So what we can do is we can repurpose or reuse the token that was provided within the condition. So I'm going to use entity. And since I want the email, I'm going to choose the email. There's also another way, if you guys are not sure what tokens are available or what field values are available within a token, you guys can install the token model specifically, which will give you this tokens options here. And if you click that, it should open up a token browser right here. And just to verify, let's see if the token I'm using is correct or incorrect. So I will open up the users tab here and let's see where the email is. So that's it. So the token that I'm using is correct. You guys can also use, instead of entity, the user mail token, because in this case, since we are specifically working with the user entity, it would also recognize user mail and not just entity mail. So that's how we can verify it. Next, we're just going to go with subject. So I'm just going to choose that as welcome. And then last, the message. Now, in order to make the experience a bit more different for each user, I would also like to make the message a bit dynamic as well. So I'm gonna use the actual name of the user, which is, so the token goes like entity display name, if I can spell it correctly. And then I'm just gonna say, welcome to the site. That's fine for now. Perfect. So as you can see, we have all these three fields set up. There is another option which is called replace tokens. Checking this option, what it actually does is it would just replace the token whenever it processes this specific action. But our actions are very good at replacing the tokens. So in this case, we don't really need to enable this option specifically. So that's it. I think our workflow over here is ready. Now I'm going to save it. And we can test this, but before I test, I just want to go through a few different options over here. You guys have options to zoom in or zoom out of the workflow if the workflow that you guys are working on is really big or complex. There's also option to get a mini map. You can search for different elements within your workflow. You can zoom to fit the model in your canvas. You can copy it, you can download it as an SVG. Next, we can go ahead and test this. So I have the website open in an anonymous, like an incognito window. I'm just going to go ahead and register a new user. So let's just go with a random email address and a user, and that should be it. Let me hit create account. And now if I go ahead and check the mail bit, I've got the email that we set up as part of our workflow, and we can see that it has sent it to the correct email address. So it has dynamically processed the token to get the updated email address from the newer user entity. It has also replaced the token for the user name. And yep, that's how it is. So let me just go back to the slides now. Sorry, there are also options to archive the workflow and create a recipe out of it. So yep, those were the final options. Perfect. So just to recap what we actually did. First, we went to the ECA page. We created a new model. We added information like label, version, documentation, tags, changelog. Next, we added the event. After that, we set up the event to work with the user content entity. Next, we added a condition to check for the user role of authenticated user. After that, we added a new action, which was to send email. We set up the recipient email address, the subject, and the message. And last, we connected everything. So as you can see, the first half over here, instant content entity, that's our event. The role, checking of the role of the user is our condition. And in the end, the send email is the action. And we tested it, and we could see that the email was sent out successfully. So success, there was 0 code written. So what we basically did is, we built a complete working automation in about 5 minutes. No PHP, no custom module, no hook implementations. Visual workflow that anyone on your team can understand and modify. Here's what matters. The same pattern works for dozens of common scenarios. User registration was just one example. Content workflows, notifications, redirects, field automation. All of these follow the same event condition action pattern we just used. Let me show you some real-world examples as well. Think about content workflows. Auto-publish articles after a manager approves them, send notifications when content needs review, archive old content automatically. We have few examples where ECA can be used. For example, e-commerce, order confirmations, inventory updates, low stock alerts, user management, block accounts after failed login attempts, send membership renewal reminders, auto-assign roles based on profile data. site maintenance, log custom events, clean up old data on cron runs, generate periodic reports. Here's the question you should be asking. What am I doing manually right now that could be automated? Or what custom code am I maintaining that could be replaced with a visual workflow? Now let me give you some guidance on how to do this well. Before you rush off and build 20 workflows, let me share with you some best practices. First, naming. Future you will thank present you for clear descriptive names. Welcome email on registration beats workflow_1 every time. Second, test on a development site first. I know it's tempting to build directly on prod. Don't. Test with sample users, sample content, work out the bugs before they affect real users. Third, keep your models focused. One model per business process. Don't try to cram everything into one giant workflow. And document your models. Use the documentation field, add comments. 6 months from now, you'll need to remember why you made certain choices. These aren't rules, they are learned lessons. Trust me on this. Now let's talk about what not to do. These are the mistakes I've seen and made myself. First, infinite loops. This is the classic. Your workflow triggers on node save, and one of your action saves the node. Congratulations, you just crashed your site. Always think through. Can this action trigger the same event? Missing tokens. You're trying to use a token that doesn't exist in that context. The workflow breaks silently. Use the token browser to verify what's available, which can be installed separately through token module. Permission issues. Remember, ECA runs with the permissions of the current user. If your workflow needs to do something only admins can do, account for that. And finally, heavy processing. Don't try to process 10,000 records in a workflow that runs on every page load. The good news, most of these are caught by ECA's visual validator. It will warn you before you deploy. When things don't work, and sometimes they won't, here's how to debug. First, check your Drupal logs, reports, recent log messages. ECA logs everything. You'll see which events fired, which conditions passed or failed. Second, enable debug mode in ECA settings. This gives you detailed execution traces. Third, use message actions during development. Add a display message action that says, I got here. Helps you trace exactly where a workflow stops. Fourth, verify your tokens. Use the token browser. Make sure the data you think exists actually exists. Fifth, test your conditions separately. Maybe your workflow isn't broken. Maybe your condition is just evaluating to false. Most debugging is straightforward. The visual interface actually makes it easier than debugging custom code. You can see the flow. You can see where it stops. Speaking of when to use ECA versus code. So how do you decide ECA or custom code? Ask yourself, is this a pattern I've seen before? Something that fits the event condition action model? If yes, standard automation, business logic, things that change frequently, use ECA. It's faster to build, easier to modify, and site builders can maintain it. If you need to write actual algorithms, process large data sets in complex ways, or build intricate custom integrations, write code. That's what code is for. Here's my rule of thumb. If you find yourself writing the same hook pattern for the third time, stop and build an ECA workflow instead. And remember, you can mix them. ECA can call custom code when you need it. It's not either or. ECA is modular by design. What we have seen today is just the beginning. These are some of the most common submodules. Each one adds new events, conditions, and actions. Need form handling? There's ECA_form. Working with views, ECA_views. Want to log events? ECA_log. And here's the powerful part. You can write your own. If you need a custom event, condition, or action that doesn't exist, you can build it in code and ECA will use it. You get the best of both worlds. Install only what you need. Don't bloat your site with modules you won't use. Let me point you to some resources for learning more. The ECA guide at ecaguide.org is your best starting point. Comprehensive documentation, examples, tutorials, and join the Drupal Slack channel, #ECA. Active community, helpful maintainers, people sharing workflows. Pull out your phones if you want, scan these codes now. The community is genuinely helpful. If you get stuck, ask. Someone's probably solved your problem already. All right, let's talk about getting started today. So you want to try this on your own site? Here's your quick start. Step 1, get Drupal/ECA. Enable the ECA core module and the sub-modules you need at minimum. ECA base, ECA content, ECA user, and ECA UI. Step 2, get and enable the modeler API module. This provides the API layer for the visual interface. Step 3, get and enable the BPMN_IO module. That's what gives you the actual visual modeler we used in the demo. The documentation walks you through all of this with exact commands. It's straightforward, 10 minutes of setup. And then you're ready to start building. Now it's your turn. Here are 3 projects you can try, ranked by difficulty. Easy. Build what we just built together, a welcome email on user registration. You've seen it done, now replicate it on your own. Medium. Content notification. Send an email to the content author when their article gets published. Hard. Auto redirect by role. When a user logs in, redirect them to different pages based on their role. Administrators go one place, editors another, subscribers somewhere else. Start with easy, get comfortable, then challenge yourself with others. The pattern is the same every time. Event, condition, action. Alright, let's recap what we've covered today. We talked about ECA fundamentals, event, condition, action, the 3 building blocks of every workflow. We explored the visual modeler interface. We built a real working automation together, live, without any safety net. We covered best practices, common pitfalls, debugging strategies, and how to decide between ECA and custom code. And I pointed you to resources for continuing your learning. Here's what I want you to walk away with. ECA brings automation to Drupal without code. It empowers site builders. It speeds up developers. It makes your sites more maintainable. That's powerful. Before we get to questions, one quick thing. Randy is doing a session on Maestro this afternoon at 3:30 in Room E. He'll be covering the differences between ECA and Maestro, 2 different workflow tools. If this topic interests you, check it out. All right, questions? I'm just going to leave on this slide if you guys want to take a photo. You can reach out to me. Okay, question.
I have a question around when you're setting up the modeler, you have those different nodes that you set up, those little entities. I always get confused or overwhelmed when setting up the properties for those entities. Do you have any tips around knowing which property key to set up, what value to put in there? Do you have any tips around that?
Are you talking about the configuration form that shows up?
Yeah, like setting conditions for those entities. The properties
right.
UI is overwhelming, I find.
Okay, so the question is that every time a new event, condition, or action has been set up, there is confusion as to how to set up the configuration form. I have ran into that. The best way that I saw dealing with it was you can just go with trial and error first. Second, the ECA guide.org actually has like a more detailed list of what each event, condition, and action does. So that's like a much better way to get some context about what is it exactly expecting. And last, I would say to probably just reach out in the community, because I'm sure someone can help you out with those. But the token browser also helps because it gives you much more context as to if you are working with tokens, then you would get a much better idea as to what token is actually available and you can use in that. Yep.
Compared to custom code, is there any significant performance difference with a workflow setup and ECA?
Based on the workflows that I have worked with, I haven't really seen much performance difference. But since ECA is also a tool which kind of lets you replicate your custom code as is 1:1, You could end up in workflows that could cause performance issues. For example, when I explained about loops, your workflow could get stuck in either an infinite loop or just like a very long loop. Even though it like ends at the end, it would just take a lot of time to maybe process that loop. So the way I have kind of tried to deal with that is we can add this action called display message. So whenever you're building out your workflow, I try to add the display message action after each event, condition, or action. So that way, whenever I'm testing it out, I get to see on like through Drupal status messages as to where did the workflow really reach, how much time did it take, was there some place where it was executing more than once. Yeah, that helps.
Thank you.
With ECA's permissions, are there ways to like let certain user roles only edit the parameters, say like control what email address something goes to, but not actually set up the ECA?
I'm not sure. Can you please?
I'm thinking like we have hundreds of sites all running the same install profile, and each one has its own person responsible for the site, and then we have multiple content authors. And the person running the site might want to receive emails when something enters draft, but it's not the same person across 100 sites. So if there was just if the ECA let them see the model and change who it goes to, but not actually set it up.
So you mean so the question is if there is multiple sites running the same workflow and each site has its own unique user, it would want to dynamically change which user the email actually goes out to?
Yeah.
So there must be some condition that you can set up, right? Because if you're able to do it through custom code, maybe each site has its own different context in some way. You could add that as a condition, and that could be used to filter out the user entity and the email. Yep.
Just to add on to that, what I think you could probably do is have like a separate config form that makes a token, and then you set it there.
I figured that was possible.
Yeah, and then you
Like
feed
there's
it.
a lot of we're writing directly to config instead of
Yes.
from custom code, and just like if there were levels of permission with the ECA where it said like this person can only touch tokens or something.
Right.
Yeah.
One more thing to add to that would also be that if you think there isn't really an action or a condition directly available in order to evaluate that and provide the user entry that you're specifically looking for each site, you could just write that custom and then ECA would pick that up as a condition or an action. So that's one of the things that we actually recently worked on. I created a content moderation workflow which sends out emails, but we were working with group context. So every time a content entity has been created, it would pull up the group that was assigned to that specific content entity, get all the users, filter them by a specific content editor role, and then send out emails to only those specific users. We further worked on that, and because the workflow was so huge that it was a bit daunting and complex for a new person to come in and directly just start working on it. But one of the other developers, what they did was take a bunch of event condition actions from their workflow and write like a custom event for it. And that kind of just made the workflow from, say if we had like 15 different nodes to just like 5 nodes.
Can we use events and conditions in a custom way? Like if I'm using Drupal as a decoupled architecture, can I trigger events with just like API calls, or we can generate API endpoints to call?
So the default submodules work with Drupal entities.
Okay.
If you're using Drupal entities, it should still work for you. But if you think that the data or the entity, the way you guys are handling it, is not within Drupal, you might have to write something custom for it.
But we can extend the ECA module?
Yes, you can extend
Okay.
all of them to create like a custom event or a custom condition or a custom action. And then ECA would recognize that. Okay, I think that's it. Once again, I would like to thank the sponsors for making this event possible, and thank you so much for attending this event.